Preparing for Hurricane George to deliver the worst. They're boarding buses and moving on out. Good morning and welcome to Weather Center. I'm Will Annan. Folks near the Gulf Coast will be keeping a watchful eye on Hurricane George. Elsewhere in the country, if you live in the Northeast, keep your umbrellas handy. I'll have more on that situation in just a minute. But now, let's go back to the Forecast Center, and standing by is Rick Griffin with more on Hurricane George.
Will, thank you and good morning. And Hurricane George shows some signs of getting stronger as it approaches the north central Gulf Coast. So all of you from the Florida Panhandle westward, and in particular in southern Alabama, Mississippi, and especially in southern sections of Louisiana, you should be prepared for a major landfalling hurricane perhaps later on today and tonight. And we'll join Dr. Steve Lyons in just a moment to get his analysis on the situation. First, of course, we want to update you on the position of George this morning. As of 4 o'clock Central, 5 Eastern, of course, 28.81 north, 28.1 north, 87.6 west. That puts the eye of Hurricane George, a much more distinct eye, by the way, as you'll see in a moment, 200 miles southeast of New Orleans, Louisiana. Top sustained winds 110. That could get more significant as the hurricane approaches the coast. The movement of George, northwest at 10, the pressure 967 millibars. Here are the hurricane warnings. Right now, the warnings, which mean, of course, that hurricane conditions are expected to develop within 24 hours. They stretch from Morgan City, Louisiana, through New Orleans, including Lake Pontchartrain, Mobile, Alabama, Biloxi, Mississippi, all the way east to Panama City in Florida. And on either side of the hurricane warnings, tropical storm warnings and hurricane watches from Intracoastal City to Morgan City and from Panama City to St. Mark's, of course, that in the state of Florida. Well, we have two on the location reports this morning. One in Pensacola Beach, Florida. That's Kristen Dodd. The other one in Biloxi, Mississippi. Jim Cantori is stationed there. First, we'd like to go to Kristen Dodd in Pensacola Beach. Kristen, good morning to you. What's the latest?
Well, good morning, Rick. The winds here at Pensacola Beach have picked up significantly over the past 15 minutes, and we're looking at actually a lot more of the crashing waves as they continue to bite away at some of the beaches. We are in the center of Pensacola Beach where we have some of the widest beach. So this would be the area that the waves would hit last. We're being protected here by a storm wall, and so that's why we've set up in this fairly well-protected area. Just off to my west, though, about 3 or 4 miles, the roads are already beginning to be washed out as those waves are now up over the dunes and over the roadways. Also at Navarre Beach, which is to my east several miles, we also have reports of some of the roads being undermined. So the crashing waves and the surf is really going to be a problem here along the barrier islands of the Florida Panhandle. We also have been monitoring the winds. We have a handheld anemometer, and this has been gauging the winds for us over the past several hours, and they have definitely been picking up. We've had a peak wind gust of 47 miles an hour. That one was at 30 miles an hour. We expect it to become more windy as we head toward dawn. Rick?
Okay, Kristen. That's Kristen Dodd from Pensacola Beach, Florida. Now let's go to Biloxi, Mississippi, and Jim Cantori. Jim, it looks like conditions are quite a bit more tranquil where you are this morning.
They are, Rick. We really haven't seen too much action since last night, since the first initial band came on through. Winds gusted to about 47 miles an hour, and that was about it. We've seen winds out of the southeast at about 10 to 20 miles an hour, and right now there's just a very, very gentle breeze. It's actually a very beautiful morning here. But again, we are expecting the very heavy rainfall with this, especially if it slows down. And people this morning that are teetering on whether or not they need to go to a shelter, especially if you live in a mobile home park or a low-lying area, you need to consider the side effects of this hurricane. Not only is it a hair from being a major hurricane, a Category 3, but it is also going to slow down, and it is going to produce very, very heavy rainfall. So this is something you need to consider, especially if you live in those low-lying areas. But other than that, Rick, this is a casino country now, and the beaches have been shut down since Friday night. So no big problems anticipated here. A lot of the businesses closed as well, and they've even canceled some of the church services today. So people are just waiting for George to move on shore and bring in the worst. Back to you.
Okay, Jim, we'll talk to you again at 1:30. Now, let's shift our focus over here to Dr. Steve Lyons, who joins me at the update desk this morning. Steve, let's talk a little bit about the impact of the storm. And as you have been indicating, perhaps one of the most significant problems with George is going to be a tremendous storm surge for some locations.
That's right. It looks pretty grim if the conditions continue for the greater New Orleans area all the way over to where Jim Cantori is there in Biloxi. Those areas are very storm surge prone. So a hurricane of strong Category 2 intensity would be up there with peak storm surge heights near 15 feet. And of course, if it intensifies into a 3, you can see that they would go beyond that, maybe up into the mid-range between 15 and 20 feet. So very, very dangerous situation, basically from the Florida Panhandle west all the way into the mouth of the Mississippi and a little beyond that. Those are the primary storm surge areas.
And on the top of the storm surge, of course, you have the battering waves, and low-lying areas are already being evacuated. There are mandatory evacuations.
That's right, and that's a very good move. And if you're in a low-lying area, you better take heed of that evacuation order. And another thing, if you're in the New Orleans area and you're considering evacuating and the roads are jammed, you may consider what your refuge of last resort might be if in fact the hurricane comes your way and conditions get rather dire. Where would you go in a last-ditch effort to save your life? I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I'm just saying it's something that you may want to think about. Where's a safe place to go? But it's very close.
Well, let's take a look at some of the mandatory evacuations this morning in Louisiana. Jefferson Parish is one, Lafourche Parish south of Golden Meadow floodgates, the Orleans Parish outside levee protection, Plaquemines Parish, that's another area of mandatory evacuations, St. Bernard Parish too, and St. Charles Parish, St. John's Parish as well, mandatory evacuations. There are voluntary evacuations as well. Back to the colorized satellite picture. And Steve, the eye becoming much more distinct, and that is certainly a sign of some strengthening.
Right, we've seen it fill in thunderstorm-wise and basically orange-wise on the western side of the circulation, which is bad news. And we also see the dark red starting to form on the western side over here. And you can see now the eye wall is there's a good eye wall there, and we're starting to see an eye wall form a little bit farther out on the northwest side there. Both indications of strengthening, which is just the worst possible thing we want to see happen here.
I believe we have a closer picture of George. No, not a lot. Oh, there we go. And Steve, in this picture, excuse me, a very ominous situation. You mentioned earlier that the western side of the storm looked a little ragged last night, but now that eye is right in the middle of the central dense overcast almost.
Exactly, and that's an indication that it's protecting itself from the outside environment, and you can see little water.
Dawn shows an angry surf developing at Pensacola Beach, Florida. Wind, rain, and building waves are a sign of Hurricane George's approach. Time is about run out for the Gulf Coast residents to take advantage of the calm weather to board up and seek shelter from the storm pressing their way. Good morning and welcome to Weather Center. I'm Mike Motley. Of particular concern is the New Orleans area because of its low-lying elevation and flood potential. We'll have live reports from across the Gulf Coast, plus we'll outline what could be a stormy afternoon and evening into the Northeast. First, for the latest on Hurricane George, let's go to Rick Griffin in the Forecast Center.
Mike, thanks a lot. George, major hurricane, almost at Category 3 status, continues to approach the north central Gulf Coast. We'll talk about the timing and the location of the next possible landfall in just a moment. Right now, though, let's go to the position report. And as of 4 o'clock Central, 5 Eastern Time this morning, the eye of George was located at 28.1 north and 87.6 west. That puts the eye 200 miles southeast of New Orleans, Louisiana, with top sustained winds of 110 miles per hour. And George continues to move northwest at 10. And if that motion continues, landfall could be sometime overnight tonight, possibly in the vicinity of New Orleans. We'll talk more about that shortly. The pressure has dropped 5 millibars since the last report, down to 962 millibars according to the Hurricane Hunter reconnaissance aircraft out flying around in the storm. How about watches and warnings? Well, here's the latest, and let's start with a hurricane warning, which is in effect from Morgan City, Louisiana, eastward to Panama City, Florida, meaning that hurricane conditions are expected to develop within 24 hours on either side of the warning area. Tropical storm warnings and hurricane watches had been posted. Well, we have some information for you concerning Pensacola Beach Highway. It's starting to flood, and anyone still on the barrier island must leave now. if you want to get off the island. And by the way, that's why we do not have Kristen Dodd for you this time, because she was forced to leave the island before the roadway was covered by increasingly high water. But we do have for you this morning Jim Cantori in Biloxi, Mississippi, and Bill Keneally in New Orleans, Louisiana. Let's start with Jim. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, Rick. And again, we continue to see these light rain showers come on in. Let me go right off the bat and take our storm cam shot. And you can see down the road to our east where the casinos are, and they've been closed since Friday night, 8 o'clock, that we do have some rather ominous skies here as the clouds continue to roll on in. But we have not seen anything that's been anywhere near tropical storm force yet. So definitely some good news there. As we take you out to the beaches, you can see here that we have some wave action now beginning to move in. And I was a little surprised that it wasn't so big earlier on today, but it's obviously gotten bigger since this morning started. We've got now 1 to 3 foot breakers coming in, and it's already started to chew away at the beach. The biggest problems here, the potential for flooding and also surge. Surge is going to be a big issue here. If you look at the way the slope is, it's very gradual. You can walk out hundreds of feet and still be in waist-deep water. So as that water comes in and is piled up east of the center, we are going to see surge anywhere from 5 to potentially even 15 feet here, even with the barrier islands. So that's going to be a big problem. We're waiting for George to come on in. We'll continue to give you live reports throughout the morning. Right now, let's head to New Orleans, another area for potential damage there. Let's get a live report from Bill Keneally. Bill?
All right, Jim, thanks a lot again. Good morning. We continue to have a little window of opportunity. When I say that, I mean we're not that wet and we're not very windy as of yet. We do have an east wind blowing. It's probably gusting 20 to 30 miles per hour at this time. We're sitting on top of the Jackson Brewery, incidentally, up around 5 floors, so hopefully we'll be free of any water for a while. Let's take a look behind me. You can see the Mississippi River. There's the big bridge crossing the river. The river itself is running, they tell me, at about 3 feet. That means that's 3 feet above sea level, and they can handle the river up to about 17 feet, they say. So if there is a sustained east wind, there will be a lot of water coming in from actually where Jim is over there west of Biloxi, coming in through an area they call the Wrigley's and then running up into the river as well as up into the lake, especially Lake Pontchartrain. There is a mandatory evacuation on the north end of Lake Pontchartrain. 100,000 folks have been forced out of their homes anywhere south of I-12. The entire town of Mandeville has been evacuated. The good news is the roadways in the areas are open now. They are flowing rather freely. The bad news is a lot of roadways, including Interstate 10 and I-310 rather, will be shutting down as the storm works in probably around mid-afternoon. So Rick, we're okay right now. There is a window to get out, but things will deteriorate very quickly as we get beyond the noontime hour.
All right, Bill Keneally in New Orleans, Louisiana. Let's go right over to our hurricane expert, Dr. Steve Lyons. Steve, we've got a new position report on George first. It's located now at 28.2 north and 87.8 west. That's about 95 miles southeast of the mouth of the Mississippi River and about 190 miles now southeast of New Orleans, Louisiana. Some of the main aspects with George: the storm surge and battering waves, damaging wind, heavy flooding rain. Let's start with the storm surge. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. The storm surge typically will be in a strong category 2 on the order of 10 to 15 feet in the right front quadrant near the eye wall. This is not everywhere in the hurricane, keep that in mind, but this is the worst case specific location in the hurricane. In this case, that would be just to the right of the eye location at landfall. The way it's going, it would look like that would be somewhere in the greater New Orleans area, Gulfport, or possibly the Biloxi area, depending on exactly which way it moves in the next 12 hours.
And with water that deep, 15 or 20 feet, we're talking flooding many, many miles inland, not just in the bayou country there.
Yeah, you can really get some major flooding if it becomes a category 3 and we get 15 to 20 feet. Right now, it looks like more like the 10 to 15 foot range, but we could get a category 3 here later. Right now, the aircraft recon's flying around out there, still tinkering on the edge of category 3. We're only 5 miles an hour off, or 1 mile an hour off, depending on how you look at it, from a category 3. So it's an intense 2. And the last major hurricane to affect the New Orleans area was Betsy in 1965.
Well, Steve, perhaps you can talk a little bit about the timing and the track, and of course the worst of the worst will be just a little east of where the eye comes on shore, the eastern part of the eye wall.
That's right. And first, let me just say this. The area over here along the Pensacola Beach area in the Florida Panhandle, that flooding is already a done deal. The waves are going to get higher there. The flooding will get worse. The hurricane could go away right now, and that will still happen. So stand by there and be prepared. Be very careful driving along those roads that they flood. The greatest flood potential, of course, is in the New Orleans area and basically to the west of Mobile, including Mobile. Time-wise, we are seeing forecast by the Hurricane Center to Category 3 later this afternoon and tonight, just before landfall. Landfall time out at the mouth of Mississippi sometime around Monday morning, but notice it's still in the vicinity of New Orleans Tuesday morning, and Wednesday morning it's still in northern New Orleans.
Good morning and thanks for joining us. I'm Mark Mancuso for this edition of Storm Watch, which is brought to you by Home Depot and, of course, dangerous Hurricane George, a threat in the Gulf, and it's still headed right towards the North Gulf Coast and New Orleans. Let's give you the latest, and as we check it out for you, here it is as of 7 a.m. Central Daylight Time from the Hurricane Center and from the data from the Hurricane Hunters. We have found that George is centered at 28.2 north, 87.8 west. That's 190 miles southeast of New Orleans, Louisiana. Only 95 miles from the coast of Louisiana, the mouth of the Mississippi River there. Winds 110 miles per hour sustained, a strong Category 2, bordering Category 3 on the Saffir-Simpson scale. The storm capable of quite a bit of damage. Movement still northwesterly at 10, and the pressure continues to drop down to 962 millibars. Presently, hurricane warnings are in effect from Morgan City, Louisiana to Panama City, Florida. East of here, we do have tropical storm warnings and hurricane watches in effect. As we take a look at our satellite picture for you, here you can see George, and here you can see the cloud shield around it, and notice the thicker clouds just getting into the coastal regions. And right here at the mouth of the Mississippi River, we do have now tropical storm sustained winds right here, 39 knots being reported by the buoy right here. Dauphin Island, winds are 34 knots, getting very close to tropical storm force, and these are sustained winds. Let's get you in a little bit closer, and we can colorize the cloud tops for you. And here you can see George moving up. Here's your center of circulation here, and here's your coast of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, northwest Florida. And on the Florida coast, you've seen the wind and the rain with these outer rain bands in these orange areas, and here's the main core of the heavy rain and the high winds, and this is now just coming into the coastal waters of southeast Louisiana. We can go to the radar for you now, and as we check that out, here you can see the rain bands coming up to the coast of northwest Florida, Panama City, Destin, Pensacola. You're feeling the wind and rain. But up around I-10 here, not much happening yet. Crestview, light easterly winds and no precipitation quite yet. Off to the west, a few showers headed towards the coast of Louisiana, and there you can see your center of circulation. And looking at the pressure falls, the past 24 hours, an old rule of thumb for a direction of a tropical system, the greatest pressure falls the past 24 hours are clustered right in this area right here. So that would tend to say this storm should continue to move northwesterly, and that means the coast of Mississippi, southeast Louisiana, and Alabama really are in for it. Here's a look at your wind gusts, and now you can see the winds gusting to 53 miles an hour right here at the Pensacola Naval Air Station. So it's just a matter of time before these sustained tropical storm force winds and hurricane force winds start to move into the region. That will occur later this morning and in particular this afternoon. Here's your strike probabilities, so showing you the expected path of the storm. Greatest threat for the storm moving into these areas in the red zone, and that's directed right at southeast Louisiana and coastal Mississippi. So here again is George, while farther out in the Atlantic we do see a couple of other tropical systems. This one is Hurricane Karl. That's moving out over the open Atlantic with winds of 105 miles per hour. And here's Hurricane Jeanne moving its way up towards the north with winds of 80 miles per hour. Neither one a threat to any land area. Closer to home, of course, is your tropical system, potential for isolated tornadoes. Well, up to the north, the cold front with a strong jet stream and a lot of convergence, a lot of lift around it, and very warm and humid air out ahead of it. So strong to severe storms will be developing and moving into the northeast this afternoon and tonight. So be on the lookout in Columbus, Pittsburgh, New York City, and Boston. Latest radar from the northeast shows some showers with heavy rain moving through Maine. But here come the storms sweeping their way through the lower Great Lakes.
How can you plan your day when you don't know what the weather's going to be like? I know people like to plan ahead for their day. I can help you out.
This program was sponsored by the Home Depot.
Home Depot is like 5 stores in one.
Well, Home Depot's ideal really is to make sure the customer gets more.
Hurricane George is bearing down on the central Gulf Coast. People in this path should take cover immediately if you already haven't.
All 113 hurricane floodgates are now shut in the city as the city prepares for the arrival of Hurricane George. We'll have a full report on Weather Center coming up.
And here in Biloxi, they continue to make preparations as Hurricane George nears. So far, little rain and wind, but that will change. Stay tuned.
A very busy morning across the Gulf. Hello and welcome to Weather Center. I'm Will Annan. As you just saw, Hurricane George continues to be a real threat. Elsewhere in the country, the Northeast should keep an eye to the sky this afternoon. More on that in just a minute. But now we're going to turn it over to Rick Riffin in our Forecast Center for more on Hurricane George.
Thank you, Will. And Hurricane George continues to approach the north central Gulf Coast states. Let's go right to our information page and show you where George is located. It is about 190 miles southeast of New Orleans, Louisiana, about 95 miles southeast of the mouth of the Mississippi River. That is the eye of George. The position, 28.2 north, 87.8 west. Top sustained winds with George still at 110. That's a strong Category 2 verging on a Category 3 hurricane. The movement, northwest 10, the pressure, 962 millibars. Just briefly to the hurricane warnings, they remain in effect for you folks from Morgan City, Louisiana to Panama City in the state of Florida. Well, we have some folks live on the scene for you. We have Jim Cantori, he's in Biloxi, Mississippi, and Bill Keneally in New Orleans, Louisiana, two locations that could be very close to the worst part of Hurricane George as it comes on shore. Let's talk first to Jim.
And that being said, we are going to be nowhere near the nearest part of this hurricane. We will definitely be moving inland because where I'm standing right now, we'll probably have, if we get to the center of this thing, another 6 to 7 feet of water above my head, which would easily flood all the beaches here and probably come almost to the street, which kind of runs parallel, if you will, with the beaches. But let me show you our storm cam. As we look down the beach to the east, you can see here that we are dealing with a lot of cloud cover, nothing in the form of rain, though, at this point. But the waves continue to move on inland, and as they do, they are slowly but surely chewing away at the beaches. And you'll notice here, as we look at this pier, we continue to see a steady rise in the water. The breakers are breaking just underneath the pier, and as they continue to roll on in, we would not be surprised, especially as the hurricane nears, that those breakers get even over the top of the end of that pier. So that's the thing you got to worry about here, storm surge, because it can get very high because of the gradual slope of the water. You can walk out hundreds of feet and still only be in waist-deep water. And as the storm piles that water inland, it'll just get higher and higher, and it could be as high as 10 to even 15 feet. Well, another area threatened by George is New Orleans. Let's find out how things are going this morning in New Orleans with a live report from Bill Keneally. Good morning, Bill.
Good morning to you, Jim. Again, we're here at the Riverview Room. We're atop the Jackson Brewery, a pretty good vista. We're up about 50 feet or so, so hopefully vertically we're out of harm's way. There is still a little bit of blue sky out here. There is a stiffening northeast wind, however, gusting at times 25 to 30 miles per hour. Transportation is still adequate. We understand now Interstate 10 and I-12 are flowing rather freely. They were not doing so yesterday nor last night, but now it seems like a lot of people are getting out of harm's way. I know the Governor Foster, ordering or urging 600,000 people to get out of this area. Most of southeastern Louisiana has had at least a voluntary, if not a mandatory, evacuation applied to their region. Now, the airport is still open. There's going to be one more flight out that we understand. After that, they're not expecting any more flights in nor out, although they will allow people to stay there for a while if they need to. So right now we're in pretty good shape here, Rick. We do see a little blue sky, a couple of drops of rain, but it looks like things will be going steadily downhill as we get towards the noontime hour. Back to you.
All right, Bill Keneally in New Orleans, Louisiana. This stop here with our hurricane expert, Dr. Steve Lyons. Steve, again, damaging winds certainly, extremely heavy rainfall, two aspects of the storm, but what about the storm surge? It would appear that there are going to be a lot of areas underwater with potentially up to a 15 to 17 foot storm surge.
That's correct. You can see from our storm surge graphic here that this is our worst case scenario for each category of hurricane for the greater New Orleans area. Keep in mind, this is not going to happen in all of the locations, but in the worst location. And right now we're looking at the 10 to 15 foot range. As we go, if it intensifies into a Category 3, it could be 15 to 20 feet. Right now it's still holding at a strong 2, and we don't see any indications from the aircraft reconnaissance that it's strengthening any more than a strong Category 2, but it's very close to a 3 now.
Let's go to the satellite picture and see. We were looking at information from one of the buoys, the Mobile South buoy, and right now wind gusts there 66 miles per hour and 30-foot waves. That's incredible.
That's right. They're reporting 31 feet, and of course we had mentioned earlier this morning and yesterday that our estimates maximum would be somewhere near 33 feet, so they're getting probably some of the worst conditions there. And of course those waves are going to continue to march onto the coast. Now we saw the people over here, they're pretty much blocked from the open ocean waves, but those big waves are going to affect the western Florida panhandle in the next 6 to 12 hours. They already are in closing rows, but it's going to get worse.
And for instance, Dauphin Island, an urgent evacuation is urged of Dauphin Island, Alabama. Residents still on the island should seek shelter as soon as possible. And for more information on that and the rest of what's going on in Alabama, let's go to Scott Etcock. He's the Public Information Manager for the Emergency Management Agency of Alabama. He's in Clanton, Alabama. Scott, thanks for joining us.
Yes,
what's
thank
happening
you.
right now?
Good morning. Governor Fob James did issue a mandatory evacuation order for southern Mobile County this morning at the request of the Mobile County Commission and the mayors of Dauphin Island and Bayou La Battery. This mandatory evacuation order is in effect. We're very concerned, and we want the residents that live on the island and residents that are in southern Mobile County and those residents that live along Mobile Bay and Mobile River also to evacuate immediately. The Mobile County Emergency Management Agency has coordinated the opening of shelters, so shelters are open there so people can go to those if they need to.
Scott, what are your worst fears with George?
Well, right now the storm surge is our worst fear. And that's why the governor took the measures at the request of the local officials as he did. Baldwin County was under a mandatory evacuation order yesterday, so both measures on the coastal areas of the state have been taken, and we feel like that we're as prepared as we can be right now. But we're also